Hello there everyone, today's video is all about the Seiss Grant number 5. So the Self-Employed Income Support Scheme grant tranche number 5, details of which have recently been released by the government. So let's dive straight in and see what this is about. So fundamentally, this is all about a turnover test. So the previous tranches of the grants, SEISS 1 through 4, were all based on what your tax returns for earlier years said, and the grant was calculated on that for self-employed people or partners in partnerships. Now, because of the timing of this grant, number 5, we are now in July 2021, and the tax year end for 2021 was about 3 months ago, but of course the deadline for submitting that tax return is not until January 2022. So the government's had a change of approach and said, look, we will base the grant not on what's in that tax return, because millions of people haven't yet submitted the tax return. So it'd be a bit harsh to say you've got to get your tax return in 6 months earlier than normal. So they said, look, we'll change how we calculate the SEISS in this particular tranche of the grant, and we'll do it based on a turnover test. That's the fairest way. So turnover specifically from April 2020 to April 2021 for that 12-month period ending on the tax year end date, 6th of April 2021, but it's just looking at your turnover, because HMRC say, yes, you should be able to easily find out what your turnover was right now for that 12-month period. It's obviously more complicated to do tax return, but turnover bit should be relatively straightforward. So where do you find the information from? Where do you source your turnover figure from? Well, the tax return is the most obvious. There will still be hundreds of thousands, if not millions, who've already done their tax return for 2021. And then you just look on the box that says turnover from your self-employed businesses, and it's right there. But if you haven't already done your tax return, then where do you get it from? Well, source documentation such as your accounting software. If you're using a cloud-based accounting software like your Xero or Sage or your QuickBooks, or from your bank accounts, or however you record your turnover, you just take that figure. You take one figure, turnover for the 12 months ended on the 6th of April 2021. So do not include the following in that figure. Do not include other income, such as previous tranches of the SEISS grant. That's not included. The local government grants, don't include that. And also things like if you had any income from Eat Out to Help Out scheme, don't include that. So they do not get included in that turnover figure. Also, what if you've started a business or finished a business within that 12-month window? We'll just put down the turnover for the periods that you're in business. So if you started 6 months in the year, that's the figure that you put down. If you finished in the year, that's the figure that you put down for working out the amounts within that 12-month period. Now, once you got your figure, it's all about comparing it to a reference year. Now, the reference year, the default reference year, is 1920. What was your turnover in the previous year? And again, if you've been doing tax returns, you'll get them from that source. But again, you might not have done a tax return. So you're not necessarily getting your reference figure from there, but you need to find a reference figure because you're comparing 2 years worth of turnover, basically. Now, what the government actually say as part of the rules for this latest tranche is, if 1920 was not a typical year, for example, if you were on long-term sick, it would be a bit harsh to compare that to the 2021 turnover, because it's all about how much 2021 has dropped in comparison to the previous year. But if the previous year was a bad year anyway, it's a bit harsh that you could be denied the full grant. So what they've said, thankfully, is saying, look, if 1920 wasn't a typical year and you earned a lot less than normal, go back to the previous year, i.e. 1819, and use that as your reference year when comparing to 2021. So that's crucial. That's very important. If 1920 wasn't a typical year, go back to 1819. And then you've got your 2 years worth of data then, your normalized period, whether it be 1819 or 1920, and then you compare to the turnover for 2021. And you put that in to the online system when you apply for this grant, and the computer spurts out the results. So basically, if your turnover is down by 30% or more between 2021 and the previous or the reference year, if it's down by more than 30%, then the grant will be 80% of 3 months worth of average trading profits, capped at 7,500. If your turnover is down by less than 30%, the grant will be 30% of 3 months of average trading profits, capped at 2,850. Now, of course, you might say, well, where do these average profits come from? Well, again, that's to do with legacy tax returns that have been submitted. So HMRC has all the data on what your average profits are, and the computer will give you that information. What you have to key in, the input from you now is just the turnover figure for that period, ended on the 6th of April 2021, and the previous reference period that you're comparing it to. So the average profits, that's already locked into the system, and HMRC and the government have that data. And then the computer will just tell you what's, what you're going to get. Has your turnover fallen by 30% or more or not? And that will dictate how much of this tranche number 5 of the SEISS grant that you get. A couple of other things. Oh yeah, if you have different businesses, so let's say you have multiple self-employments, which is not uncommon now in the gig economy. A lot of people have different self-employed businesses, not just doing one thing. They could be doing a few things. You simply aggregate everything. So you, on this turnover test, you just add the turnover from all your different sources, your different types of businesses, add it all together for self-employed income, and then put it into the computer. See how you compare to that base year. But crucially, I think the takeaway on this is, if 1920 was a bad year, an untypical year, you compare to the base year of 1819, which is fairer, because obviously if you've had a bad year in 1920 and a bad year in 2021, you might not have dropped by 30%. But when you compare 2021 to 1819, that gives you more chance of having the drop in excess of 30%, which then warrants you getting a higher grant, a higher amount in tranche 5. So do go on the government's website, have a look at this, www.gov.uk, and have a look, see what you can claim for tranche number 5 of the SEISS. If you like this video, please do subscribe right there, and I'll see you soon.